welcome to my presentation, which is on speech and language. My presentation is going to be at the other end of the spectrum to what Dr. Tyler was talking about, which was all of the research. Mine is a case story and really a story following a child with GAND 2B. So, hi, my name is Solaru. I'm a highly specialist speech and language therapist. So that just means I've been a speech and language therapist for quite a long time. It doesn't mean I'm a specialist in GAND or GAND 2B. As you will see during this presentation, I've very much learned as I've gone along about GAND. So I've worked in the NHS and I've also worked in the private sector. So it is 11 years in the National Health Service. So who here is from the UK? Okay, and do we have some parents from other parts of the world? Where are you from?
Germany.
Germany? Germany?
Yeah, Germany as well.
And Germany as well, okay. So in the UK we have the National Health Service, which is the healthcare that's offered to everybody within the UK. So in Germany you may have a different system. I don't know if you have something similar or if it's, yeah. So there'll be a little bit of talk about the NHS. And my specialism is in early intervention, complex communication needs and AAC. Does everybody know what I'm talking about when I mention AAC? Yeah? So AAC is alternative and augmentative communication. We're going to talk about that a little bit in a moment. So GAND 2B, so it's a rare genetic syndrome. I won't go into this too much because Dr. Tyler's just spoken an awful lot about it. But Rebecca's just given me the new numbers. When I started working with my clients, I think there were around 350 diagnosed, but as of February 2025, around 456 across 51 different countries. And today, I'd like to talk to you about a little girl called Shay. So Shay is the daughter of Rebecca and Brian, who are hosting the event today. I'm going to talk to you about the assessment that I undertook, the therapy intervention, which was a mixture of looking at her understanding, her expression, her speech, and also AAC. And then I'll also just have a chat about the therapy and how things played out once she started school. Okay, so this is Shay. So I met Shay in January 2023. Here she's 3 years and 6 months old. She had her initial assessment with my colleague, and she had that through AT Therapy. So we're a small independent company based in the northwest and northeast of 20 therapists. Rebecca and Brian decided to go along the private route because they weren't getting much support for their daughter. So my colleague went out and did an assessment, and the focus of that assessment was on AAC. Okay, so AAC is anything that we do to add to communication. So if we think about speech as one form of communication, when we're using AAC, we're adding something to augment or offering an alternative form of communication. And AAC can look like things that we do with our body, so it can be like sign language, it can be using paper forms such as communication books, it can be using like electronic communication devices and iPads, it can be using like buttons that you press and they speak a message. So there's a whole range of AAC. And the reason why this was introduced with Shay is because when my colleague went out to do the assessment, she looked up GAND 2B and saw that there was the chance that she was going to have some challenges with speech. And what my colleague wanted to do was get something in place straight away to support with communication, because although we wanted to work on speech, we also wanted to make sure that she could communicate her wants and needs to. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the AAC assessment and then a little bit about the speech assessment. So there's a few stages with an AAC assessment. So first of all, we need to look at functional communication. So this is looking at how the child and their communication partner are communicating. Where are they communicating? How are they communicating? What's already being used? Is the child using natural gesture? Are they pointing to things to get their message across? Trying to get a baseline of what's working and where the communication breakdown might be happening. Thinking about context for communication. So if you've got a child that's going to hydrotherapy 3 times a week, then, you know, an electronic communication device, that could be tricky to access in the pool. So all of that is going to feed into the types of AAC that are offered. Okay, so once we've kind of got that baseline of all of the different types of communication that are already happening and in which situations, we begin to do something called feature matching. So this is where we look at the language and look at the skills that the child has, and then think about the different types of AAC and begin to match them to the child to make that choice as to what will be the best fit for them at that time. And we like to talk about an AAC system, because it may be that just one type of AAC isn't enough. As I said, if you've got a child that's doing hydro, it might be that they have a technological device, but they might also have, you know, some laminated communication cards that can go in the pool with them. There's also access methods. This is how are they going to access the communication. So here we've got some buttons that can be pressed with hands. So these can speak a single message. These have got a few more messages on. We've got a communication book, so the PODS book, they're great for kind of developing a conversational style of communication. They need a partner to be able to support them with that, who will guide them through the book. Here we've got an iPad with some language software on, but it's being accessed by switch. So a child that might not have the fine motor movements to point to the buttons might use a switch to scan the vocabulary that's needed. Here's a child that's using what we call direct access, so he's pointing with his fingers to create his message. Up here, this is eye gaze, so the communication partner is holding the choices up and they're looking through the middle, and they will be looking to see where the child is eye pointing to make their choice. So if your child has physical needs and they're not able to use their hands potentially for switch or for direct access, then there's non-technological eye gaze, and then here we've got eye gaze, which is with a device where there's a camera along the bottom that's picking up where the eyes are looking, and the eyes become like a computer mouse that selects the vocabulary. So there's all of these things to consider when thinking about AAC. Furthermore, if a child goes on to use an AAC device that has language on it, there's also lots of different language software packages out there. So here we've got Tobii Dynavox as one of the biggies, especially I think it's an American company, but we use it a lot over here in the UK. Smartbox is a British company, we also use them a lot at AT Therapy. And within all of the language packages that they have, there's different levels of complexity as to whether you're starting off with one message at a time, so one big button that has the words on, up to, you know, 50 cells on a screen. So there's lots to think about. So in Shay's case, because she was only 3, because she was a busy little one, she was in nursery, and she's very social, we wanted something that was small and portable for her to be able to carry around. Because the family were also funding everything themselves, we wanted to think about cost. So some of the devices can be really expensive, like an eye gaze device can be, you know, £7,000-8,000, needs replacing every 5 years. We decided to go with an iPad mini that she could access with her fingers, and then we just bought the software to go onto it for her following her trial. So just some other technological features. So for older children, I mean, this presentation is about a little mini because Shay was only 3, but you know, for older children, you might also want to be thinking about their AAC, so they can go on Facebook, so they can turn their favourite Disney movie on, so they can get on YouTube, so they can access Spotify and their music, so they can text. So all of these devices, they can link up with other apps as well, which is great, and we call that environmental control. Okay, so then we arranged a trial for Shay. So she had a 2-week trial with the iPad mini, with the language on. It went really, really well. The family did lots of supporting around modelling language to her. She responded to it well. She had good attention towards the screen. At this stage, we're not expecting a child to do anything at all, any expressive communication. We just want to see how they respond to it, and it's all on us as the communication partner to just model that language. And if you think about when we all learn to speak, this happens because people speak at us for a year, not expecting anything in response. You know, with a baby, you'll speak to them for a year, and then between a year, 18 months, they begin to say their first words. So it's the same with this type of AAC. You're wanting to model, and then eventually you're expecting that they will begin to use the device themselves, but there's no pressure at all at the start. We're not asking them to touch the screen, look at the screen, any of that. Should all be really natural. Okay. So this, I suppose, is around UK. Is there anybody here whose child is already using AAC? Okay. Is there anybody who has a young child or maybe an older child where you're thinking maybe they need some sort of AAC? Okay. So the referral process in the UK, so normally you would refer into your speech and language therapy service. Within your speech and language, NHS speech and language therapy service, there may be a specialist in AAC who will then make a referral to, we have AAC hubs around the UK, so in the Northwest we have the ACE Centre, over in the Northeast we have RCAS, but there are criteria that children need to meet in order to have their referral accepted. So it's a really meaty, your therapist will need to do a really meaty assessment, and they'll need to prove that your child is meeting some of these criteria. So one of the criteria is that your child can maybe put two words together to create a message. So I've got the picture of the girl on the bike here because at AT Therapy we believe that you know, you would give a child a bike or a trike even though they can't ride it, because they need to have exposure to it, to practice, to then be able to do it. And it's the same with AAC, but unfortunately it's a little bit the wrong way around, where you need to prove that your child can do it, and then you get the device. But how can you prove that your child can do it if you don't have the device? So that is the challenge that a lot of parents face. So there is the private route, which is some of those big companies that I mentioned. You can just contact them direct and you can book an appointment with them, and they will come out and do an assessment with you, but then it's funding the device. So it may be then that you're doing some sort of charity raising in order to fund the device, but the reps will give you support and give you training if your speech and language therapist isn't on board. Any questions about anything to do with AAC?
Where's the hub in the Northwest?
It's the ACE Centre, so it's in Oldham.
Oldham?
Yeah. Okie doke. Any other questions about AAC? No? Okay, so speech assessment. So my colleague did all of that assessment with Shay. I started working for AT Therapy after coming in from the NHS, and they thought that I would be a good fit for Shay because I love working with small, young children. So I turn up for my session, ready to do some AAC. I'm chatting with Rebecca, I'm thinking, right, we can go and use their devices, animals. You've got lots of animals, haven't you, Rebecca, where you live? Like donkeys and goats and chickens. So I thought, oh, we'll go and do some sessions there and we can talk about the animals and we can do some bacon. And then Rebecca's like, actually, I really want to work on speech. And I was like, oh, right, okay, let me go away and research that. So I had a little look, and, you know, in terms of the research, there wasn't loads out there, as Dr. Tyler was saying this morning. It's growing. But I found this study that was really helpful for me. So I think the name is pronounced Shay or Shay, I'm not sure. It's a study in 2020, and it was with 50 individuals with GAND. The findings are here, but one of the main findings was 94% experienced some sort of difference in their expressive language development. So we know that expressive language isn't developing as expected. There were many that communicated non-verbally or with a limited number of spoken words, and it was across ages. And also there was the observation that there were motor coordination challenges as well. And in the study they talk about apraxia of speech. So I'll go on and talk a little bit more about that. So has everybody heard of childhood apraxia of speech? No? Yeah? Mixed? So in the UK it was called verbal childhood dyspraxia up until last year or the year before, when the Royal College of Speech and Language Therapists decided to change it so that it was in line with what all of the other countries were calling it, which is childhood apraxia of speech, because it was just confusing within the research seeing these different definitions. So you might see some things around childhood verbal dyspraxia, you might see some things around childhood apraxia of speech, but it's all the same thing. And what it is it's a neurological speech disorder that affects the speech movements. So you can have apraxia that affects the body, which is going to affect your fine and gross motor skills. But here I'm talking about apraxia of speech. So this is all about it's all about how the brain communicates with the articulators. So the jaw, the tongue, the lips. And what happens with apraxia of speech is somewhere along that pathway there's a breakdown that happens, and that has a neurological basis to do with the syndrome of GATAD2B. So some of the key characteristics of CAS, we'll call it, childhood apraxia of speech, is there can be inconsistent speech sound errors. So a child knows what they want to say, but each time they say it, it's coming out differently. And that may be with speech, or it may be just trying to get those first sounds out. It can sound inconsistent. So when I first started working with Shay, she had some words that I call them pop-out words. She would say them, but then we might not hear them again, and she might not be able to say them on demand. And often we see with CAS that the more a child is thinking about what they want to say and focusing on speech, the trickier it can feel. Whereas the natural speech, that there's little thought and there's no pressure, that's where language comes from and comes more fluently. So you might also see difficulty transitioning between sounds and syllables. So it might be that a child can say k, but then when you try to do cow or car, that's another step up and that's challenging. For a child that has quite a lot of speech and maybe they're joining words, using sentences, CAS might affect the prosody of their speech. So that's like the intonation, the rhythm of speech. So you might see some differences there. So we can say that there is a scale of CAS where it might be that a child is struggling to get out those individual sounds, up to a child maybe have fluent speech, but then the prosody is affected. Okay. So it's really important that CAS is identified, because the research around it is that it needs a specialised intervention approach. Because if you go for speech and language therapy and your therapist is delivering kind of run-of-the-mill speech and language intervention that isn't CAS orientated, then it may not have much of an impact. And I'll talk to you a little bit more about what CAS therapy needs to look like. Any questions about CAS? No? Okay, so the assessment process. So if you have been referred into your speech and language therapist, you need to ask for the specialist in speech in that service, because CAS is something that when I was at uni, I had a few lectures on it, and then it was quite a few years before I came across it again in my NHS job. It can look like other speech disorders that children then grow out of. Most therapists working with CAS need some sort of postgraduate training, so it's important that you ask for your speech specialist and maybe explore if they've had some postgraduate training in CAS and if that's something that they're experienced in. So it needs a special kind of assessment as well, so we call this a dynamic speech assessment. So a standard speech and language therapy assessment, you might go, they might do some play with your child, play some activities, and then they make their diagnosis then and there on that first day. Whereas with CAS, and particularly with Shay, because she was only 3, because she didn't have a lot of speech at that time, it's hard to make a diagnosis, because one of the key things that you're looking for is that inconsistency of speech. So if there's not a lot of speech, that can be quite hard to measure. So there's a few different things that can be done in order to kind of have a look at that. So I observed her vocalizations to see what her speech was like when she was relaxed during play, and then I compared it to how her speech was when there was more of a demand and I was trying to get her to imitate me, and I saw that there was a discrepancy between that, and it was harder when there was that demand placed on it and she was thinking about her speech. So that's the structured imitation tasks. I also looked at cueing responses. So this is giving her support with speech. So normally with speech therapy, the support comes in the intervention, but with this, I'm giving her support during the diagnosis, because I want to see, when I give you support with your speech, does that help speech? Because that gives me an indication that you know, that support is supporting you with the coordination of your language. So some of the supports that I gave were like touching her face, giving her visual cues, slowing down my speech, using tools. I'll talk about all of those shortly. And I was looking for inconsistency. So with Shay, I saw that she could be inconsistent. Some weeks she would be able to say things, sometimes not. Even within a session, she could maybe say something at the start, but by the end of the session, she was getting tired and she would become more inconsistent. Difficulty with transitions, so we might have a sound, but then trying to add another sound to it might be tricky. So there are all these different things that we were looking at in order to make that assessment. But one of the main things that helped me with that assessment was that research paper that said, you know, most children with GATAD2B are showing signs of apraxia. And that was really key for me because I went on to write a very lengthy report to the NHS speech and language therapist saying, this is everything I've done with Shay, this is what I found, but this is also what the research says. I sent that off to the NHS speech and language therapist because I wanted this diagnosis on her NHS medical records. And that was really important because I wanted to make sure that she got the right intervention from her NHS therapist because she wasn't getting anything at that point. So the report that I wrote was accepted, which is great. She has a really good NHS therapist who is happy to work alongside me, and she now has that diagnosis on her medical record. And that's been massive for Shay because she was getting a session once every 3 to 6 months, but now with that diagnosis, she has weekly speech and language therapist from her NHS therapist. I recently went to go and visit her in school, and the school said this is unheard of. We don't have any children that have weekly therapy. So that diagnosis was really important because then the NHS therapist can look at the research for CAS and see that children need a high level of speech and language therapy input in order to make progress. Okay, so any questions about that? Yeah?
Our daughter is 5 but in Germany it's
Verbal interaction.
Yeah.
No, it's not distracted. And there's, but what you were talking about is similar. Could you tell us a little more about that process?
I think that they are the same.
They are?
I think that they're the same.
Because
Yeah.
what you were talking about
It's the same, yeah.
yeah,
so-
just because they are both words, we have taxi and dyslexia, so we have both of it.
Yes. So when I was in university, I was taught that apraxia means kind of no speech, and dyspraxia is more like you've got some speech, but it's affected. But now there is the consensus that we're calling it all childhood apraxia of speech, and it's all on a scale. So within that, you might have a child that doesn't have any speech, or you might have a child that's quite fluent with speech, but you know the prosody is affected. So I think that Britain and Germany were using the terminology verbal dyspraxia of speech, and now Britain is using childhood apraxia of speech, and that's been the last year or two that has changed. So it may be something that Germany go on to do. The reason why the change happened is because so many countries were using CAS, so it just made sense to call it the same thing, but my understanding is that it's the same. Yeah. Okay, so what does therapy look like? So I've listed a load of different therapy approaches where we have some research or we have some evidence base to say that these are things that work. So we've got this page and we've got this page here. I'm not going to go into all of them because I don't have enough time, but I am going to talk about quite a few of them because I did use quite a few of them with Shay. And what I'm talking about here is, I suppose in this case study, is I'm not saying that this is what you should do with your child. I'm just saying that this is what we did with Shay, and this is something that's been working for her. And it was a real mix of approaches and changing what we did and trying different things in order to find something that fits for Shay. Okay. So yeah, just bearing in mind that your SALT may not have experience with any of those approaches. Most of those approaches are postgraduate training courses that a therapist will go on to. So you might want to ask your therapist what postgraduate training they've got in supporting children with CAS. These slides can be shared so that you've got that list there to have a look through. Okay. And then another thing, I don't know how it is in Germany, but in the UK, in the NHS we have something called pathways. So when your child is referred into your speech and language therapy service, they will be what we call triaged. So the therapist will decide what they think the main challenge is for your child, and then they will be put onto a pathway, and this is all to do with funding. So a child may be put on a pathway that is, this child has developmental difficulties, and these are the therapy approaches that we are going to use with that child. This child has a speech disorder, and this is what we're going to use. This child has autism, and this is what we're going to use. So the difficulty with this is that there's a bit of a lack of flexibility, and a child may fall in more than one pathway. And then another thing, which is why it's so important and so great that all of your children have got the diagnosis, is when I worked in the NHS, I had a lot of children that came to me, and I worked in the child development unit. So all of the children that I saw had developmental needs. Often they needed OT, physio, paediatrician. But a lot of these children, because they didn't have a diagnosis on their records, it was unspecified, I could do my best in terms of what assessment and intervention I offered, but I didn't know enough about their diagnosis to be able to offer potentially what was correct for them, if that makes sense. Whereas with you all having this diagnosis, you know that there's some research there now that means that you can say, this isn't just a learning difficulty, this is a specific speech issue, so I want some specific speech support, please. Okay, so something that we started with was called the Nuffield Dyspraxia programme, but also for apraxia. So this kind of approach, this is probably what you'll come across within the NHS. So it's kind of a watch me, copy me approach. So we're starting off with consonants and vowels, and we're teaching a child to be able to copy those sounds and then eventually put them together. So we might teach a child b, 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 and getting lots of repetitions. This is something that's really important with CAS, is because we're trying to, the neural pathway that is, I suppose, controlling that behaviour needs to become solidified, and we do that by practice and lots of repetition. So within a lot of these approaches, you'll find that we call it like drills or repetition. We want to get a high number of repetition in order to solidify that pathway so that speech becomes easier and more automatic. So with this approach, you might be teaching a consonant, b, 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 and then once they've got it, we add a vowel, ba, 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 and then we might add a consonant, b, at, bat, and we might get them to say those separately and then begin to join them together, so to blend them together to make a word. So it's a really good programme, but Shay, when I started working with Shay, she couldn't do ba, she couldn't do a, she couldn't round her lips, she couldn't bring her lips together, she couldn't open her mouth on demand. So, great programme, but for Shay, she couldn't access that because she wasn't able to imitate speech. So I needed to go in at a different level for Shay and add a different level of support. Okay, so the DTTC hierarchy, so I can never remember what it stands for. Let me just go back and I'll tell you. So dynamic, temporal and tactile cueing, but everyone just calls it DTTC because it's really hard to say. So this is something that's been put together by a really amazing researcher in CAS called Edith Strand. If you type Edith Strand into YouTube, she's got loads of free training on childhood apraxia of speech. So you can watch her presentations, and she will give a lot of advice around assessment and interventions, and also on her approach that she's put together. What I love is that her resources are free, so you can go and you can go on her website and you can get some free training in this as well. She's not trying to make a load of money out of this. She's an academic and she wants to give that help for free, which is great. And there's lots of evidence that this is an approach that works. So what this looks like is, to begin with, you're practicing speech sounds simultaneously. So I will be making a sound and I'll be at Shay's level, she'll be right in front of me. I'm really trying to encourage her to look at my lips and watch what I'm doing, and then we'll practice saying a sound together. I will slow down my speech and it might be ah, ah, But because of those like mirror neurons in the brain, that can kind of trigger this movement in terms of the child being able to copy. And you do it very slowly at the same time.
Sorry.
It's all right. At the same time, and then you're working through a hierarchy. So once a child can say a sound with you at this very slowed rate, and they can do that 5 to 15 times on one sound, you would then move on to direct imitation, where you say the sound and then they copy kind of immediately after. And then you would go on to delayed imitation, so you're kind of reducing that support. So then you would say the sound and then they would say it a little bit after you, and then you're working towards spontaneous. So you've got this hierarchy of support where you're going from saying it together to saying it separately. And it's all around using real words and real speech as well. So you might be starting off with full words. So I tried this with Shay, and she wasn't able to do that. The level was too high for her because she couldn't control opening and closing her mouth. There were a lot of movements that she couldn't turn her voice on and off. So within speech, some speech sounds are voice, some speech sounds are voiceless. That means some we use our voice box, for some we don't. She needed help with all of that. So great approach, but not for Shay at this stage. So then I went on to using something called Talk Tools. So Talk Tools is offering a higher level of support because we're giving some feedback on the face to help the body know where, it's giving that proprioceptive feedback, it's helping the body know where it is and what's happening. So there is some research on this, but not the higher level of the two approaches that I tried before. Within the NHS, they might not want to use this. They might say it's not on our pathway, we've not got enough research. What I love about working for a small private company is we can just try things, and okay, we don't have loads and loads of research, but let's try it with your child for 3 months, and if it works for your child, we have the research that we need. We have that anecdotal research for your child. And that's what we did with Shay, and it really, really worked for her. It really helped. So because Shay wasn't able to like round her lips, we need to be able to do that for sounds like w and ooh. So we introduced straw drinking with Shay, and this helped give her lots of practice throughout the day just to round her lips. So Shay was using like a soft heated bottle at the time because that was a way to just get loads of fluids in her and make sure she was hydrated. But we transitioned to putting her onto a bottle that had like a rigid straw. And if you look at the Talk Tools online, there's like straw hierarchies going from easier straws to more difficult straws that can help to develop that lip rounding. We also looked at blowing bubbles to get that lip rounding, but to have air pass outwards, which is what we need for vocalising. So to begin with Shay, we began to get the lip rounding, but we do things like, pretending to blow out a candle, but she'd breathe in because she's like, right, okay, I need to round my lips, but then that other movement that we practiced would kick in. So we had to work on that, the blowing in versus the blowing out. Another thing that we practiced is, so because Shay wasn't able to turn her voice on and off, so with something like this, which is just like a flute or a recorder or a horn, we blow and it makes a sound, so this is voice off. Whereas with a kazoo, if I blow, it doesn't make a sound. You have to turn your voice on to be able to use a kazoo. Okay, so you have to make your voice box vibrate. So that was really key for helping Shay learn how to turn her voice on and off. So these are things that you probably need to do with a speech and language therapist, because a speech therapist would know which sounds are voiced, which sounds are voiceless. For example, t is a voiceless sound, whereas d is made in exactly the same position, but it's produced with voice. So there's all of these pairs that a speech and language therapist would know about. But this was a great way to help Shay begin to learn the differences between voice on and voice off. Another thing that we used with Shay, so Shay struggled to bring her lips together on demand, so often her mouth, she had an open mouth posture and she breathed through her open mouth. So this is like a little, like a spatula essentially, And I just used that to give her some feedback to bring her lips together, and we were working towards just holding it in her mouth, in between her lips, in order to bring the lips together, which is important for sounds like p and b. So this was really, really hard for Shay. She wanted to bite it between her teeth, and it's something that I still see that she does have some challenges with. We used another tool to develop that kind of jaw strength and jaw stability, because we think actually it was difficult for her to just hold her jaw in that position, because for 3 years she's been down here and she's had that open mouth position. Another thing that we used was, this is a Z vibe, so it's like a little vibrating tool. You can get different ends to go on them, and I used that before starting speech work with her to kind of draw her attention and awareness to the mouth area, and also to kind of draw her attention to like her lips to help with closure. Also, if you've got like a child that's like mouthing a lot and needing that feedback, this gives a lot of feedback, so it can be a way to give that feedback in a way that means that they're not chewing up their jumper or you know, putting lots of toys in their mouth. Any questions about talk tools? It's called a Z vibe. Yeah. So if you go on the website, I think they're around £30 maybe, and you can get all different ends to go on them. And then there's different ones that you can use to get like jaw height to kind of.
Does that help with teeth grinding?
Yes. It's going to give a lot of feedback. If the grinding is happening because they're needing that feedback and really getting something from it, you can get ones with really tough tips so that they can really bite down hard on it, and it'll also vibrate and it'll give a lot of feedback. So yeah, that's called ARC's Z Vibe, and you can just order them online. I think you might be able to get them on Amazon.
Can you just spell that out?
Yeah, sure. So it's ARC, like Noah's Ark, ARK, and then Z Vibe, VIBE. Has anybody here, has their child used talk tools? What, yeah. What was your experience?
At first she was totally afraid of everything.
Oh, okay.
We have a therapy center in the southern part of Germany who used to work with it. It's called Mundtüte, and there's pipes in it and something to catch the tongue and to train the tongue and sucking through
It comes from the Padawan.
Oh, okay.
And they work a lot with training muscles and the voice and everything. And it's like you put it.
Like they have like surgical tubing, very thin ones, and they drill a hole, the stiff part of the pacifier, so that it comes right under the nookie.
Okay.
And then give the child the pacifier, and they have to suck fluid through it.
Oh, okay.
That really helped a lot.
To form the words where you need to push the tongue up to the
Top part of your mouth.
Yeah, that's it, the alveolar ridge. That's really interesting. I've not heard of that.
It's pretty similar.
Yeah.
Different tools. No, some are quite the same, but some are different. It's eye-opening how this training and the repetition of the training helps them to develop the
single letter vowels and whatnot.
Yeah. The repetitions are really key, and things like drinking is a great way if you can get practice in there, because children need to drink, so it's a way that you can build the therapy into a daily activity. But just like some ideas of things that we use, so things like this, there's, I don't know, like 20 odd pieces in there. So I might get Shay to say 3 sounds for every one of those that she put in. So everything that I did with Shay was, it was all play based. Here you just pop in the coins in, but she feels as though she's just playing, but I'm getting those repetitions in through the play. Okay, I'll just show you one more thing actually. Another thing that I did with Shay is, so because she could produce, we got first, so when we managed to bring the lips together, we got the sound. So is a nasal sound, your lips are closed and the air is coming through your nose. I then wanted Shay to be able to do p and b, so we could start on those words. But no matter what she did, she produced So I introduced these little tiny nose clips that kind of held her nose so that the air could go through, and then that helped her produce a b. And then we transitioned to me kind of just holding it in front of her nose, so she had that cue, and it kind of tricked her brain into thinking that I can't go through my nose, and then eventually fades that out. And then she was able to get the p and b, which was great. So this is one of her speech and language programs when we were working on with the talk tools. So we were working on trying to get a variety of vowels. So vowels being inconsistent is quite a big common feature with apraxia. Vowels are really, really important because they really change the meaning of our speech. So if with speech you switch out a consonant, you can normally figure out if it's cow or tau, like cow, you can normally figure out what somebody's saying. Whereas if the vowels change, that really throws speech off. So I really wanted to focus on that with her because the only vowel she had at the time was ah. So I wanted to get some variety in there. We were doing the chewy tube to build up some of that jaw strength and just trying to get that open-close movement that's just important for a lot of sound, to get it more controlled. And also in terms of her jaw height, so whenever she opens her mouth, she opens really, really wide, so wide that she would often gag. So doing this, I was teaching her jaw grading, so to be able to open and close her jaw to a smaller level, because if the mouth is wide open, there are certain sounds that you're just never going to be able to produce because your jaw needs to be more graded. So yeah, the lip press, which is to get the lips to close together, this one, and then the horns and the kazoo to try and get the voice versus voiceless. And then also her AAC, we're still doing the AAC as well, some targets around using that socially in nursery. Okay. Was there a question? No? This is the Talk Tools Apraxia kit. So these, you've got m, p, b, this is for the grading of the jaw, and then this is for lip rounding. So we introduced that as well a little bit later. Okay, so October 2024. So by this point, I've been working with Shay since January to October. So she had some pop-out words. So she'd say things like guinea pig and grandma and come out with these complicated words, but then not ever say them again or not say them for a long time. But now she could control open and close mouth. She couldn't yet close her lips on demand without the spatula, but with the spatula she was starting to do that. Again, with the rounding of her lips, that should say she could round her lips. She'd learn how to blow out a candle. These are things that she couldn't do at the start. And then some of these sounds were beginning to come into her speech. So we were working on words like more, mama, dada, and she was beginning to be able to do them in therapy, but not spontaneously. Okay, so Rebecca suggested that we try something called prompt. So I'd heard of prompt, but it's not something that's widely used in the UK. It's really widely used in America, whereas in the UK it's not widely used. And what this is it's a intervention where you are giving support to the face as somebody is speaking. So with the talk tools, you're kind of looking at those, I suppose, you can only really work on one sound at a time, whereas with prompts you're working on kind of real speech, so you're teaching somebody from the start to do whole words. So it's much more functional and there's much more research around this approach and that it works. So there's 80 studies published on prompt, but it's not widely used in the UK, and I think it's because a therapist has to be trained in it. It costs quite a few £100. There's multiple courses to go on, taking you up to £1,000. But you can only practice it if you are prompt trained. So if you've got a team of therapists in, within an NHS service, they don't really want to have to pay all that money. Unfortunately, the NHS can't afford it. So I went and got the training, managed to wangle it for free by hosting it at AT Therapy. And I got that training for Shay so that I could start this intervention with her. So I'll show you a video of Shay at the start of treatment, and then I'll show you a couple of sessions of me doing prompt with Shay.
Hey, look at Mummy. Oh, good noises.
Oh,
Oh.
a minute. Right.
Are you going to show Mummy? Oh right, are you going to eat now? Are you going to show Mummy how we've been practicing your words? No? Right, look at me. Can you go no? Oh, good girl, is that baby? Can you say baby? Baby? Look at Mummy. Shall we say baby?
Mama.
I know you can say mama, you're really good at mama, aren't you? But we'll try Look here, look at Mummy's lips.
Mama.
Baby.
Mama.
Who's this? What?
So Rebecca's doing an amazing job of encouraging Shay to look at her lips, watch what she's doing. You can see that Shay is now able to get those closed lip words. You can see that she's tucking her lips around her teeth to give herself more support with her speech. This is something that she still does. So we're still working on that, bringing the lips together in a relaxed manner, but at the moment she's tensing everything to try and give her the support to be able to produce that sound. And you can see that sometimes it's baba, sometimes it's mama, so she's got that inconsistency as well. Right, I'll show you a couple of prompt videos. I don't have a lot of time left, so I'll show you these and then I'll fly through the last slides. So this is prompt practicing the word up. Okay, let's have a practice. Watch Hatie's lips. Ready? Oh. Should we do that together? Open. Like Haiti. Yeah! Superstar. Super. So Shay's needing help to get into the initial correct position. With prompts, you first of all map the word out onto the face so they can feel how it should feel correctly. So you're using your hands to help them create the sound. Doesn't matter if they say it or not, so they can feel it on their face. And then the second time they have a go, and then you're trying to shape that word for them. I'll show you another one. Together. This is more. Looks good. Feet together, lips together. That's that. Beautiful. More. Big belly up there, maybe. Feet together, lips together. More. Yay! That was really good, Shay. That was really good. Okay, any comments on that? Okay.
Wow.
Okay. You just see how many slides I've got left. Okay, just a few. Sorry, I don't know if there's a faster way to do this. Okay. So her progress by June 2024. So Shay was able to say no, mama, doll, dog, shh, E, yes, bye bye, dirty, good girl, up, there, in there, me. So we really worked on lots of different mouth positions. So like me involves spreading the lips. So that's something that we really had to work on. And then also voiced and voiceless, different consonants, and then trying to bring in those vowels as well. So she was still inconsistent. It was still hard work for Shay. But what we were finding is that as her phonemic repertoire had increased and she had more consonants, more vowels, that was beginning to spill over into her pop-out words. And so in those random words that she was saying, we were beginning to get more surprises of things that she was able to say, which was great. So in the UK, school finishes in July. Before going to school, I had supported with writing the Education, Health and Care Plan, which I think Rebecca's put a copy into everybody's packs.
Yeah, I just put the section, not the whole HCP, just your section, just to see how detailed it is in comparison to others, let's say.
Yeah.
Because I remember speaking to our caseworker, and she was surprised to see something so detailed, which actually has helped. She started school in September, and actually she has speech therapy once a week on the NHS. And I know this is not the case for everybody, it depends where it is. And we've just now upshaped that. It hasn't happened yet, but the prompt speech therapy will actually start after these holidays in school. So it did help, and I think Katie on board will help get everything in place in the right way from the get-go.
It's made a difference for Shay, but it wasn't easy to get this on her EHCP. So the EHCP is the plan that says exactly what a child should get, what the therapy should look like, who should be delivering it, how many hours a week. For many children, your EHCP might not be that specific. It might just say access to speech therapy, access to physio, access to OT. Whereas what I wanted is the hours on there, so it was really clear. And once it's on there, it's a legally binding document. So I wrote my report that fed into the EHCP, and they added it to the report. And I think it was a bit of an accident, to be honest, wasn't it, Rebecca? Because once she got to school and they read the report and saw that all of this was on there, they called me in for a meeting, didn't they? And I had a meeting with the head teacher, the class teacher, the NHS therapist, somebody from the council, and I did a presentation about prompts and the research behind prompts, because they opened up saying, we don't do non-evidence-based approaches here, we follow NHS advice. But I was like, but you're not up to date with the research, because there's lots of research on this. And so then they kind of took all of that on board, but now we're in, where are we, April? That was September, and I'm just starting therapy with Shay in school. So it's taken all of this time, although it was on a report, to get it all approved and to get me into school. So hopefully that will start pretty soon. Okay. So with the EHCP, so first of all, I wrote the report to get the diagnosis. Shay's NHS therapist did her own assessment and then agreed. And then I wrote the EHCP report, which was added to her main report, and we were lucky. But once we got to school, the report was questioned, and we had to keep pushing to get it on there. I think they wanted it taking off, or they wanted Shay's family to pay for the therapy. Whereas what we were saying is we've got a year of evidence to show that this works for Shay. We need it on her report, and we need the council to pay for it.
I think the other one as well is they try to say that it's not evidence-based, but actually it is, because in other countries there's lots of evidence to show this therapy helps.
Yeah.
And the other one was that actually some trusts in the NHS are doing proper therapy. I think Katie knows which one.
Yeah.
So when we explained that actually some trusts do deliver this, it was kind of no return, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But again, having Katie on side that could present this on a factual basis help get the approvals and funding.
Yeah. Okay. So challenges for Shay. So although we got this on our EHCP, and we could prove that other trusts in Britain were using it, and it's widely used in America, prompt is widely used in America, widely used in Australia, they still weren't able to offer it because they said it's not on our pathway, it's not on our local offer. We offer DTT C, the one that I can't say, the one that we tried at the start, and I struggled to get some improvement with that. So she's still offered that, which is fine, and it's helpful for her to have additional therapy, but she also gets prompts as well. Sometimes the EHCPs can reflect what the service can offer rather than what the child can need. So it's trying to be involved as much as possible with the EHCP process. If your child already has an EHCP, every year you'll have an annual review. So it's making sure that you're fully involved in that, and that the EHCP should be amended every year to reflect where they're at. And you can always make changes and get things added in. It may seem that you can't, but you can. Okay. So yeah, just a little bit more progress. Now this is March. So what can you do for your child? So make sure that your speech and language therapist understands the profile of GATAD 2B, of GAND. Direct them to the research and supporting them to understand that we know that there is the speech disorder, child apraxia of speech associated with GATAD 2B. You know, the difficulties with speech may not just be because your child has learning needs, it's specifically also to do with speech, and the therapist needs to look into that. You can learn more about childhood apraxia of speech, having a look at Dr. Edith Strand's free information on YouTube. You can learn more about AAC. So there's a really great podcast called Talking with Tech. It's an American podcast, but it covers everything to do with AAC. You can also have a look at Smartbox and Toby Dynavox. They have loads of videos on their website about how to support a child with AAC, all the different types of AAC, and make sure that you have your say with the EHCP process. And then there's also Sendias, if anybody, I don't know if anybody's used Sendias. So they're an independent agency in the UK that will support you with the EHCP process. So if you need help, you can contact them. You can go on the website and look for your local Sendias member, and they will be able to give you an advocate for free who will be able to support you with the process of your EHCP. Any questions?
We're calling it CAS, but I'm going through the for adulthood transition, and that's a bit of a challenge because a lot of the things that we're facing are all very centred on younger children, and there's a real reluctance to put that information in his EHCP for his adult years.
Okay.
And there's very little out there really for adult support. Is it CAS, or is there an adult version of CAS? Or
It's a lifelong condition.
why CAS? Why childhood?
Because it's something that you're born with. So it's not something, because you can also have apraxia of speech that's caused by a brain injury later in life. So if you have a stroke or like a car accident that causes a brain injury, you can have apraxia. So it's neurological, but you weren't born with it. So the CAS element is to say, my child was born with this and it's a lifelong condition. So it's different from the one which is an acquired apraxia. So although it's called childhood, it relates to adults because it's a lifelong
It's really
condition.
important because it is something we're born with. So.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Teeth grinding.
You can't stop her doing it. She's very well now.
Yeah. I think it's to do with trying to get some sort of feedback there, in terms of there's something about that movement, that action that is, it might be calming, it might be regulating, ritual, or it could even be something that's involuntary, that was developed over time. So we're kind of acknowledging that need is there. There's a reason why your child is doing that. So really we'll be looking to see, is there something that we can offer that's going to help still give that feedback, so we're not taking that away, but maybe a way that's not going to be damaging to the teeth or causing headaches and things like that.
What are the sensory tunes?
Yeah.
They're not just sketches of dribble and mess.
Zephyr might give a bit more feedback because it has the vibration with it as well. But it's yeah.
Some days you don't hear it, but other days, as soon as you hear it, it's like on your last nerve all day long.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
intimidating, isn't it?
Yeah. My brother's autistic. He's in his 40s now, but he grinds and he always has. So.
I wonder if it's all of us as well, like to all the kids teeth right, because it's a big issue for us now.
Yeah, and maybe a show of hands if your children grind their teeth. Show of hands if your children do not grind their teeth. Okay, so you're in minority.
Is there something you can like put in the mouth to stop because it's teeth are like? So is there anything you can put in the mouth like?
Yeah, so you
Like
have
a gum shield or something?
get them shields that are worn at night time. I don't know about the daytime, how that would impact on.
Because he grasps his teeth
Yeah.
all day,
And also with children, I know adults that have them at night time. I don't know about
Is that kind of linked to
So just a question here about challenges with swallowing, and is that related to the ataxia of speech? So yes, a lot of children with GAND can have challenges with swallowing, and you can call it kind of non-speech ataxia, but it is linked. It's to do with the coordination. So not just of the swallow, but also some of your children might have other fine and gross motor challenges, and it's all a part of the syndrome.
And is the, obviously with the hypotonia as well, I suppose as muscle tone improves with therapy, is that likely to improve kind of swallowing and possibly the speech acquisition?
So with Shay, when I first started working with her, she had challenges with her swallow. She was having her foods was quite very softened, whereas now, would you say that's developed over time a bit, Brian, as she's kind of got older and practiced and developed those skills? But I'm not a dysphagia therapist, so it's not my specialism. So I can only really talk from my experience with Shay, but you would need to chat with a dysphagia trained speech and language therapist. Yeah, I think we need to finish.
Oh, yeah, Katie. A round of applause, please, for Katie. In very many ways, she's been a lifesaver over the last 2 or 3 years and shown an incredible commitment to Shay. We've been very lucky to find Katie, and if you do have the ability to go out and look for somebody and find a speech and language therapist as good as Katie, from personal advice, I would say engage with them. If you haven't got an EHCP, get somebody like Katie to contribute to that, because it's a very powerful document, as I'm sure you're all well aware. And having it as detailed as Katie's one was a big bonus for us, as Rebecca explained. Katie, we're going to let you go now. We're going to serve food.